Hey everybody, this is Grace. In this video I'm going to talk about, well, dysfunctional families. Those of us who grew up in truly dysfunctional families and some of their strange beliefs and growing up hearing strange stories. Now strange depends on what the era was. What was strange then is these days is thought of as kind of becoming, especially the norm. I mentioned that I grew up with a mother that was a conspiracy theorist way back then. I just turned 57 this month. And way back then, she believed in things that just people didn't believe in much. Not many. Not that you heard of, at least. That's one of those things, not that you heard of. Could have been. But she believed in everything, paranoia. She was, like I said, a conspiracy theorist. Now I heard so much about Watergate and the man on the moon, and never happened, and I never heard flat earth though. So many things, yeah. And I'm doing my video like this today, as you probably hear, they're doing our lawn right now, so it's very noisy out there, and I wasn't going to go out there and do it. Okay, so they chose to, at that moment, to do right next to my window. So anyway, I had this on my mind, like, just recently, and I took some notes and made some notes today. But about I don't know, a week or so ago, I was out in my SUV to make videos, and I'd just gotten out there, and the sun was out, bright, no rain, nothing. I'm sitting in my SUV, and I'm hearing drip, 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 drip inside the SUV. And I mentioned this in a video. Still don't know what it was. Still have no clue what it was. I got out, checked them all out. The back, the front. I was thinking maybe it's some kind of fly or something, or a moth or something on the in one of the windows making a fluttering sound. Could not figure it out. Still don't know. Adam said that maybe it was and I turned on the AC and all that, but I don't know. Anyway, now in my family that would have been norm, a norm, to say, not everybody in my family, but to say, oh, it's it's haunted. Haunted was the thing that they really enjoyed telling little kids. Me, when I was a kid, I have 4 siblings. Haunted stories about haunted houses, haunted. One of my mothers, as I got older, before she died, she was, I don't remember how old she was, 79 when she passed away. But closer to the end, she was saying things like the front doorbell would go off by itself. It was one that had a battery in it, and she would say that was my dad talking to her. And one of my siblings believed it too, and that was kind of like a norm, and for my family, seriously, and some of the people I know, not all, but some. And I have other people that I know that are just total opposite, like me. They don't believe in that kind of thing. Even if there's evidence, there has to be a logical reason for it happening. But yeah, she also felt, my mother, closer to her, end of her life, that people, that she was watching the news, and while she was watching the news, they were watching her. Okay, she had dementia. Okay, but one of my siblings, the same sibling, also believed that when you're watching on TV, they're watching you. Can you imagine how many people they're watching at the same time? So, I don't know. See, my brain just doesn't think like that. I shouldn't have laughed, but, yeah, that was bizarre. But anyway, for those of us who did have dysfunctional families, and you may have, like I was saying, you may have grown up hearing really strange, odd stories, especially haunted stories, haunted houses, haunted whatever. You're not alone. And like I said, I heard these from, I think the earliest one I remember hearing was about the house that my parents were living in. I was the 4th out of 5 children. The fifth one wasn't born then. But the house they were living in when I was born until I was 2 years old, and then they moved from it. My maternal grandparents, they built a house for our family next door to theirs. And it's a big house. And I heard this story about the house they lived in before then, so the one we moved from when I was 2. And it had it had a history. They said that um, the house was previously owned before the people before them. It was a man and his son, and his son was an adult, and they got into an argument, and they were underneath a tree. They were standing underneath a tree, and there was an axe sitting there up against the tree, and they got into an argument, and I think it was the son killed the dad with that, and then after that, after my parents got it, my maternal grandfather was out there, and a ring of fire surrounded him around that tree. Okay, I heard these kinds of stories. I also heard funny ones about that house. One of them was that apparently it was a really bad place they lived in. I don't know. And things were different back then than they are now. And there was a lot of fields around it, just fields. And I can remember them when I was older. They were still there as an adult. But it was fields, and they had, just regular things you can imagine fields have. And the funny story, they would say that one night they'd always had problems with doors opening and closing, and by themselves. Well, back then they didn't have ACs. They didn't use air conditioners. They left the windows open. Well, yeah, that kind of can happen. Doors closing and opening even. I've seen it. But they also, it was one night that my mother was asleep, my parents were asleep, and my mother was woken up, or my dad was woken up by some sound of thumping. And yeah, it was him. And he got up and he saw his shoes. He had some work boots, and he saw his shoes moving across the floor. Both. That's interesting. Like as if somebody's walking. And but what it turned out to be, they got real scared and wondering if the place is haunted. They always had haunted stories about it, like I said. But as it turned out, it was field mice, plural. I don't know about the odds of that happening, each one getting a field mouse in it, and walking around, but hey, it can happen. My puppy has scared me with getting one of Adam's shoes that, humans have to learn. When you have a puppy, put up your shoes. And he was walking and he was thumping it, and I thought somebody was walking through the house. He was just thumping it, had it in his mouth and was thumping it, as he walked down the hallway. So, these things happen. I always find a logical, explanation for it or something like that. I think that there always is, and, they figured out it was, but they still had this thing about that house being haunted. And years later, one of my sisters, I had a house that was an older house. I bought it for rental property, and one of my sisters rented it, and she said that at night, that it must have been a woman, an old elderly woman that had owned the house before. And well, we knew who owned it before then. We bought it from them, but before that, that she had an obsession with rings, and she would try to come and take her rings off of her hand during the middle of the night. Okay, what was she on? No, I mean, she's not one to be on anything, but yeah, I mean, there's some, you have nightmares, especially, I do, I don't know about anybody else, but I have them if I eat something that's sweet, carbohydrates, a lot of carbohydrates. I don't eat too much, but if I do that before I go to sleep, there's a good chance I'm going to have a terrible nightmare, or night terrors, yeah. So I always find an explanation for something. Okay. Now, this was the way that they were. My family, my grandparents, I only knew my maternal grandparents. My dad's mother died when he was a child, and his dad was an alcoholic, and he hardly ever saw him, which was fine by me. All of us, really. But, my maternal grandparents, they were like this. Also, a lot of people, not a lot, but in our families, tended to see these things this way, but I was not one of them. I was the black sheep. I was one of the black sheep in the whole family, the extended family. And if you didn't believe what was abnormal then, again, it's not so abnormal now, but abnormal then, if you didn't believe as they believed, there was something wrong with you. There was nothing wrong with me. In my mind, there was something wrong with them. You see? And that's something that's pretty much normal these days. But I heard so many stories, and I'll talk about some of them. Another one was my grandparents' house was next door, and they built our house next door to theirs. And growing up, uh, we would go over there every once in a while, and it only had one bathroom. I think it had 3 bedrooms or 4 bedrooms, and it only had one little tiny, very tiny bathroom, and it was long, but it wasn't all that even that long. It was really tight in there. And my grandmother said that the people who owned the house before then, one of them was a woman, and she loved wearing lavender. Lavender was her favorite scent, and she used lavender soap, lavender perfume. I don't know how they knew that, but she loved lavender, and she died in that house. That was the story. She died in that house, and in that bathroom, you would always smell lavender. Okay, I remember when that room was the end of the house, and then they had a bedroom or living room, whatever they used it for at the time, built on behind it. But there was a window there, and it would often be open. Now, there could have been some lavender somewhere, and it would come in and see. And that's how my brain would think. The scent would come through a window, and that's why they would smell lavender. Well, I lived in that house when I got older and was married for a very short while, and a lot of weird things happened in that house, let me tell you. And then it's the same thing, doors shutting, slamming, with all the doors, we had air conditioner then, and smelling lavender. And that room was not a back room, so it had a room attached to it. But even with the evidence, I still say that there was some reason. Now, I love lavender now. The scent that I like to buy for air spray or something is lavender. So, yeah. Okay, so that's just some of the things I heard. But what about other people? I want to know. I know, how I see it. But were you raised this way? And are you a believer now or not? Do you still hold the same views you had when you were younger, or did it eventually you turn to their way of seeing it? And it doesn't have to be about something like this. It can be about any kind of odd beliefs that they have. How do you see it? Anyway, leave a comment below. I'll talk to you on another video.